Welcome, gentle listener, to this peaceful evening tale that will carry you softly into the world of long ago. Tonight, we shall follow the daily footsteps of King Edmund the Wise, ruler of the prosperous kingdom of Thornwick during the 13th century. As the moon rises and stars begin their ancient dance across the sky, let us drift back through the mists of time to discover what truly filled the hours of a medieval sovereign dot as the first pale light of dawn touched the tall towers of Thornwick Castle. King Edmund stirred in his chamber high above the sleeping countryside. The stone walls around him had witnessed centuries of rulers, but none had faced the intricate web of responsibilities that awaited Edmund each morning. Unlike the simple awakening of common folk, the king's day began with a carefully orchestrated ceremony that would set the tone for everything that followed. Young Thomas, the king's most trusted personal attendant, approached the royal bed with quiet reverence. Thomas had served the crown for 7 years, learning the delicate balance required to wake a ruler who carried the weight of an entire kingdom on his shoulders. The morning air was crisp and cool, filtering through the narrow windows that looked out over the vast lands that Edmund governed. The process of dressing the king was far more complex than modern minds might imagine. Each garment carried meaning. Each color choice sent subtle messages to the various nobles, merchants, and foreign visitors who would observe the royal presence throughout the day. Thomas carefully selected fabrics of deep blue and gold, colors that spoke of stability and prosperity. The heavy velvet robes, lined with soft fur from the northern forests, were not merely clothing but symbols of the divine authority that medieval people believed flowed directly from heaven to their earthly ruler. While Thomas attended to these material preparations, Chancellor William approached with the first briefings of the day. William was a man of great learning, educated in the finest monasteries, who had devoted his life to serving the crown with wisdom and discretion. His weathered hands held scrolls containing news that had arrived during the night hours, carried by swift messengers from the far corners of the realm. The reports painted a complex picture of the kingdom's condition. 3 merchant caravans had arrived safely from the eastern territories, bringing valuable goods and reassuring news of peaceful conditions along the trade routes. However, troubling rumors spoke of strange armed men gathering in the forest lands to the west, and the harvest reports from the southern provinces suggested that the coming winter might prove challenging for the common folk who depended on royal protection and guidance. King Edmund listened to these reports with the careful attention that had earned him his reputation for wisdom. His advisors often marveled at his ability to absorb complex information while simultaneously considering the broader implications of each development. Even as Thomas adjusted the golden circlet upon the royal brow, Edmund's mind was already working through the challenges that would require his attention in the hours ahead. Morning prayers and divine connection. Soft tolling of the castle chapel bells called the royal household to morning prayers, a sacred duty that formed the spiritual foundation of medieval kingship. King Edmund understood that his authority came not from human ambition or military might alone, but from the divine blessing that connected earthly rulers to the heavenly order. The chapel, with its soaring stone arches and brilliant colored glass windows, served as both a place of worship and a political stage where the king's piety would be observed by all who mattered in the kingdom. Father Benedict, the royal chaplain, was a man of gentle wisdom who had guided Edmund's spiritual development since the young prince's earliest years. His calm voice and thoughtful sermons provided a sense of continuity and peace in the midst of the constant pressures that surrounded royal life. The morning service began with ancient Latin chants that seemed to float upward with the incense smoke, creating an atmosphere of timeless reverence. As Edmund knelt in prayer, his thoughts naturally turned to the enormous responsibilities that rested upon his shoulders. The medieval mind did not separate spiritual and temporal concerns as modern thinking often does. Instead, prayer became a way of seeking divine guidance for the practical decisions that would affect thousands of lives. Should he increase the royal guard along the western borders? How could the kingdom best prepare for potential hardships in the coming winter? These were not merely administrative questions, but moral challenges that required both human wisdom and heavenly insight. The chapel gradually filled with the most important members of the royal court. Duke Aldrich, the king's most trusted military advisor, knelt nearby with the weathered hands of a man who had spent decades wielding sword and shield in service to the crown. Lady Margaret, the Queen's chief attendant and one of the wisest women in the kingdom, offered her own quiet prayers for the royal family and the realm they served. Young nobles and ambitious courtiers also gathered for the morning service, understanding that their presence would be noted and remembered. In medieval society, showing proper respect for religious duties was essential for maintaining political credibility. Those who seemed indifferent to spiritual matters would find themselves excluded from the inner circles where important decisions were made and valuable opportunities arose. The morning prayers concluded with a special blessing for the kingdom and its people, spoken in the ancient words that had been used by countless generations of rulers. Edmund rose from his knees feeling refreshed and centered, ready to face whatever challenges the day might bring. The brief period of spiritual reflection had reminded him that his power was not his own possession, but a sacred trust that must be used wisely for the benefit of all who lived under his protection. The morning audience. Voices of the realm following the conclusion of morning prayers. King Edmund proceeded to the Great Hall for one of the most important and demanding parts of his daily routine, the morning audience. This ancient tradition allowed subjects of all social stations to present their concerns, requests, and information directly to their sovereign. The enormous hall, with its high wooden ceiling and massive stone pillars, could accommodate hundreds of people, and on this particular morning, it would need every bit of that space. Sir Geoffrey, the court-martial, had spent the early morning hours organizing the long line of petitioners who waited for their brief opportunity to address the king. The diversity of those seeking royal attention reflected the full complexity of medieval society. Wealthy merchants hoping to secure trading privileges stood alongside humble farmers seeking justice in local disputes. Foreign ambassadors with carefully prepared diplomatic messages waited patiently near local craftsmen who had traveled for days simply to tell their king about conditions in distant villages. The morning audience required Edmund to demonstrate the remarkable range of skills that separated truly effective rulers from those who merely held titles. Each petitioner presented different types of challenges that demanded distinct approaches and specialized knowledge. The king needed to understand legal precedents, economic principles, military strategy, diplomatic protocol, and human psychology, often switching rapidly between these different areas of expertise as the stream of visitors presented their various concerns. A group of wool merchants from the northern provinces approached the throne with concerns about new taxes that threatened to disrupt their traditional trade relationships. Their spokesman, Master Robert, was a man of considerable wealth and influence whose support was crucial for maintaining the kingdom's economic prosperity. Edmund listened carefully to their arguments, weighing their concerns against the royal treasury's need for additional revenue to strengthen border defenses. His response needed to address their immediate worries while maintaining the broader fiscal policies necessary for effective governance. Next came Dame Eleanor, an elderly widow whose late husband had served the crown with distinction for many years. She sought the king's assistance in a complex inheritance dispute that involved powerful local nobles who were attempting to claim her family's ancestral lands. This case required Edmund to demonstrate his commitment to justice for all subjects, regardless of their social position or political influence. His decision would be closely watched by observers throughout the kingdom, as it would reveal important aspects of royal character and priorities. A traveling merchant named Peter brought disturbing news from the eastern borderlands. where he had observed unusual military activity that might indicate preparations for raids or invasion. This intelligence required immediate attention, but Edmund knew that he must gather additional information before taking any dramatic action that might inadvertently provoke the very conflict he sought to prevent. Perhaps most challenging of all was young Mary, the daughter of a village blacksmith, who had walked for 3 days to seek the king's intervention in a dispute with local church officials who were demanding unreasonable payments from her widowed mother. Her case represented the hopes and fears of countless common folk who looked to their king as their ultimate protector against injustice and oppression. Edmund addressed each petitioner with the careful attention and respect that had earned him the loyalty of his subjects. He understood that these brief interactions were not mere formalities, but crucial opportunities to demonstrate royal justice, gather important information about conditions throughout the realm, and maintain the personal connections that held medieval kingdoms together. The complexities of royal administration. As the morning audience concluded, King Edmund retreated to his private chambers for the less visible but equally demanding work of royal administration. The stone room, warmed by a crackling fire and lit by tall windows overlooking the castle gardens, served as the nerve center for governing a realm that stretched across hundreds of miles and encompassed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. Master Henry, the royal clerk, had prepared stacks of documents that required the king's personal attention. Unlike modern governments with their elaborate bureaucracies, medieval administration depended heavily on the ruler's direct involvement in countless detailed decisions. Each parchment represented choices that could affect the lives and livelihoods of royal subjects. From individual families to entire communities, a collection of land grants awaited royal approval, each requiring careful consideration of the political and economic implications. Granting estates to deserving nobles could strengthen royal alliances and reward loyal service, but the wrong choices might accidentally empower potential rivals or create conflicts between competing factions. Edmund studied each proposal with the meticulous attention that his advisors had learned to expect, asking detailed questions about the backgrounds of the proposed recipients and the strategic importance of the lands in question. Trade agreements with neighboring kingdoms demanded equally careful review. The prosperity of Thornwick depended partly on maintaining favorable commercial relationships with foreign rulers, but each agreement contained subtle implications for military alliances, diplomatic obligations, and internal economic policies. A seemingly simple arrangement to exchange grain for manufactured goods might actually represent a complex web of political commitments that could influence the kingdom's position in future conflicts or negotiations. Legal documents required the king's seal on cases that had been appealed from lower courts throughout the realm. Medieval justice was a complex system that balanced royal law, local customs, church doctrine, and feudal obligations in ways that modern legal minds might find bewildering. Edmund needed to understand not only the specific facts of each case, but also the broader precedents that his decisions would establish for future similar situations. Military appointments demanded, perhaps, the most careful consideration of all. Choosing the right commanders for various fortresses and border regions could mean the difference between peace and war, between successful defense and catastrophic defeat. Each appointment required evaluating not only the candidate's military skills, but also their political loyalties, their relationships with local populations, and their ability to work effectively with other royal officers. The afternoon hours brought reports from the royal treasury, managed by Sir Walter, a man whose mathematical skills and absolute honesty had made him indispensable to effective royal administration. The kingdom's finances were far more complex than simple income and expenditure calculations. Royal revenue came from numerous sources: taxes collected from various regions, profits from royal estates, customs duties from international trade, and payments from nobles who owed financial obligations to the crown. Understanding these financial flows required Edmund to think like both an accountant and a strategic planner. Spending decisions made today would affect the kingdom's ability to respond to crises that might arise months or years in the future. Military campaigns could consume enormous resources very quickly, but failing to maintain adequate defenses might invite attacks that would prove far more costly than prevention. The weight of military leadership as the sun reached its highest point in the autumn sky. King Edmund turned his attention to military matters that demanded both immediate decisions and long-term strategic planning. The castle's war room, with its detailed maps and collection of weapons from across the known world, served as headquarters for protecting a realm that faced potential threats from multiple directions. Sir Marcus, the royal marshal, spread out carefully drawn maps showing the kingdom's extensive borders and the disposition of friendly and potentially hostile forces throughout the region. The information painted a complex picture that required constant analysis and adjustment. Friendly relations with the northern kingdoms seemed stable, but recent intelligence suggested that political changes in those courts might alter their attitudes toward Thornwick in ways that could prove either beneficial or dangerous. The western forests remained a source of persistent concern. Reports from traveling merchants and local hunters suggested that groups of armed men were gathering in those remote regions, possibly preparing for raids against wealthy estates or trade caravans. Edmund needed to decide whether to send investigative patrols that might provide better information about these potential threats, or to wait for more definitive evidence before taking action that might be interpreted as provocation. Military planning in medieval times required thinking about logistics that would challenge modern commanders, even with their advanced technology. Moving armies across long distances meant coordinating food supplies, transportation for equipment, arrangements for wounded soldiers, and communication systems that depended entirely on human messengers traveling on horseback over roads that were often little more than muddy tracks through dangerous territory. The kingdom's various fortresses required constant attention to their defenses, supplies, and personnel. Each castle commanded a strategic position that could control important roads, river crossings, or mountain passes. But maintaining these defenses required significant resources and careful management. Sir Marcus reported on the condition of walls and gates, the adequacy of stored weapons and food, and the morale and readiness of the garrison troops who stood ready to defend these crucial positions. Training programs for royal forces demanded regular review and adjustment. Medieval warfare was evolving rapidly as new weapons and tactics developed across Europe. Crossbows were becoming more effective and widely used, requiring changes in both offensive and defensive strategies. Castle design was advancing in response to improved siege techniques, creating new possibilities for both attackers and defenders. Edmund listened carefully to detailed reports about the readiness and capabilities of knights who owed military service to the crown. These warriors formed the backbone of medieval armies, but managing their service required delicate political skills. Knights were typically men of considerable wealth and social standing who had their own estates to manage and their own political interests to pursue. Maintaining their loyalty and enthusiasm required balancing their military obligations with recognition of their independent status and personal dignity. The afternoon brought disturbing news from the eastern borders, where scouts had observed unusual activity that might indicate preparations for raids or more serious military action. Edmund needed to evaluate this intelligence carefully, considering both the immediate threat and the broader implications of various possible responses. Mobilizing defensive forces might deter potential attackers, but it would also consume valuable resources and might be interpreted as aggressive. Preparation for offensive action. Evening diplomacy and political relationships as Daylight began to fade into the gentle colors of evening. King Edmund prepared for one of the most demanding aspects of royal life, managing the complex web of political relationships that held his kingdom together. The great hall, now lit by hundreds of candles and torches, became a stage for the subtle diplomatic theater that determined whether nobles remained loyal, whether foreign ambassadors left satisfied with their reception, and whether the various factions within the realm continued to work together harmoniously. The evening meal was far more than a social gathering. It was a carefully orchestrated political event where every gesture, every conversation, and every seating arrangement carried significance that would be analyzed and discussed throughout the kingdom. Master John, the royal steward, had spent hours planning the evenings, arrangements to ensure that proper respect was shown to all important guests while avoiding any slights that might create lasting political problems. Ambassador Philippe from the neighboring kingdom of Ravenshollow occupied a place of honor near the royal table. His mission involved negotiating a potential marriage alliance between his young princess and one of Edmund's cousins, an arrangement that could strengthen peaceful relationships between the two realms for generations to come. However, the discussions required extraordinary delicacy, as the wrong terms might inadvertently create obligations that could drag Thornwick into conflicts that served other kingdoms' interests rather than its own. Duke Harold, one of Edmund's most powerful vassals, had traveled from his eastern territories to discuss concerns about defending the border, regions that formed a crucial buffer against potential invasions. Harold controlled significant military resources and commanded the loyalty of numerous lesser nobles, making his support essential for maintaining stability throughout the realm. However, his requests for additional royal assistance needed to be balanced against the needs of other regions and the limitations of the royal treasury. Lady Catherine, the abbess of St. Margaret's Convent, represented the complex relationship between royal authority and church power that defined medieval political life. Her convent controlled extensive lands and wielded considerable influence over local populations, but church interests did not always align perfectly with royal policies. The conversation between Edmund and Lady Catherine required navigating questions of taxation, legal jurisdiction, and moral authority that could affect the kingdom's relationship with religious institutions throughout the realm. The evening's discussions also included Master David, leader of the Merchant Guild, whose members controlled much of the kingdom's international trade. The guild's cooperation was essential for maintaining the commercial relationships that generated significant portions of royal revenue. But merchants' interests sometimes conflicted with broader strategic objectives. The David sought royal support for expanding trade routes into new territories, proposals that offered potential benefits but also carried risks that needed careful evaluation. Young Sir William, recently returned from diplomatic missions to distant courts, provided valuable intelligence about political developments that might affect Thornwick's interests. His reports painted a complex picture of shifting alliances, emerging threats, and potential opportunities that required careful analysis and strategic planning. The information he had gathered would influence royal policies for months to come, but interpreting its significance required deep understanding of international politics and human psychology. The solitude of royal decision-making is. The evening's formal gatherings concluded, and the castle settled into the quiet hours of night. King Edmund retreated to his private study for the most challenging part of his daily routine, the solitary contemplation and decision-making that ultimately determined the fate of his kingdom and its people. The small chamber, lit only by the warm glow of oil lamps and the dying embers of the fireplace, provided a peaceful refuge where the king could reflect on the day's events and prepare for the challenges that tomorrow would inevitably bring. The weight of royal responsibility became most apparent during these quiet hours when Edmund could no longer rely on the advice of counselors or the distraction of constant activity. Each decision he made carried consequences that rippled outward through the lives of thousands of people, many of whom he would never meet, but whose welfare depended entirely on his wisdom and judgment. The burden of this responsibility was something that no amount of preparation could fully prepare a person to carry. Edmund reviewed the intelligence reports that had accumulated throughout the day, searching for patterns and implications that might reveal developing threats or opportunities. The art of ruling required thinking several moves ahead, like a master chess player who could anticipate how current decisions would influence future possibilities. A choice to strengthen defenses in one region might leave another area more vulnerable. A decision to support one faction's interests might alienate others whose cooperation would be needed in different circumstances. The king's personal journal lay open on the wooden desk, its pages filled with careful notes about the personalities, motivations, and capabilities of the many people whose actions could affect the kingdom's future. Managing a medieval realm required intimate knowledge of human nature and the ability to predict how different individuals would respond to various situations. Edmund had learned that understanding people was often more important than understanding laws or military strategy. Financial concerns demanded careful attention during these evening hours of reflection. The royal treasury needed to support current operations while maintaining reserves for unexpected emergencies that could arise without warning. Military campaigns, natural disasters, failed harvests, or sudden diplomatic crises could require enormous expenditures that would stretch the kingdom's resources to their limits. Balancing these competing demands required both mathematical precision and intuitive understanding of risk management. Plans for the kingdom's long-term development occupied much of Edmund's private thinking time. Unlike modern leaders who could delegate long-term planning to specialized departments, medieval kings needed to personally envision and guide their realm's evolution over decades. Which regions should receive priority for infrastructure improvements? How could the kingdom's military capabilities be enhanced without provoking unnecessary conflicts? What policies would best promote economic growth while maintaining social stability? The most difficult aspect of these solitary reflections involved accepting the tragic reality that leadership sometimes required choosing between different forms of suffering rather than finding perfect solutions that avoided all negative consequences. Every policy decision created winners and losers. Every resource allocation meant that some needs would be met while others went unaddressed. Edmund had learned to focus on making the best possible decisions with available information rather than torturing himself over the imperfect nature of all human choices. The eternal cycle of royal service as midnight approached and the castle settled into the deepest quiet of night. King Edmund prepared for sleep with the knowledge that tomorrow would bring another day of equally demanding challenges and responsibilities. The cycle of royal life continued without pause, year after year, requiring sustained excellence under pressure that few human beings could maintain for extended periods. The king's bedchamber, warmed by carefully banked fires and protected by loyal guards who maintained their watch throughout the night hours, provided a brief respite from the constant pressures of leadership. Yet even in sleep, Edmund's mind continued to work through the complex problems that awaited resolution. Medieval rulers learned to find rest despite carrying burdens that would overwhelm most people, understanding that tomorrow's effectiveness depended on tonight's recovery. The daily routine we have followed represents just one day in a reign that would span decades, each filled with similar challenges and equally demanding responsibilities. King Edmund's life illustrates the extraordinary human capabilities that medieval kingship required and the remarkable achievements that were possible when those capabilities were fully developed and consistently applied in service of others. Modern people, accustomed to thinking of medieval times as primitive and simple, might be surprised to discover the sophistication and complexity that characterized effective royal leadership during this period. The skills required for successful medieval kingship: strategic thinking, diplomatic finesse, military planning, economic management, legal reasoning, and psychological insight, remain just as relevant for modern leaders who face different but equally challenging responsibilities. The example of King Edmund and his medieval contemporaries reminds us that individual human potential is far greater than most people realize, and that extraordinary achievements become possible when that potential is fully developed and consistently applied in service of purposes larger than personal comfort and convenience. Their daily lives demonstrate that excellence in any demanding field requires the same combination of systematic skill development, unwavering commitment, and sustained effort over many years. The peaceful end of this particular day in the life of King Edmund the Wise marks not a conclusion, but simply another turn in the endless cycle of service that defines truly meaningful leadership. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new demands for the wisdom, courage, and dedication that medieval kingship required. The castle sleeps, but the responsibilities of leadership continue, waiting for the dawn to renew the eternal cycle of royal service to the realm and its people. As we close this gentle journey through a day in medieval royal life, we carry with us the inspiring example of human beings who chose to accept extraordinary responsibilities and then did whatever was necessary to fulfill those responsibilities effectively. Their legacy reminds us that the same potential for meaningful service and positive impact exists in every human life, waiting to be developed and expressed through our own daily choices and commitments. The soft night wind whispers through the castle towers, carrying the dreams of a kingdom safely protected by the vigilant care of leaders who understood that true power means accepting responsibility for outcomes that extend far beyond one's own lifetime. In this understanding, King Edmund and his fellow medieval rulers offer us timeless wisdom about the nature of leadership, the possibilities of human development, and the profound satisfaction that comes from dedicating one's life to serving purposes greater than oneself. Sleep now comes gently to the realm of Thornwick, as it comes to us all who have shared this peaceful journey through the daily life of a medieval king. Tomorrow's challenges will arrive in their proper time, but tonight offers the rest and restoration that prepare us for whatever service life may call us to perform. In the quiet darkness, we rest with the knowledge that human beings are capable of remarkable achievements when they commit themselves fully to serving others with wisdom, courage, and unwavering dedication. The royal household's evening rituals as King Edmund settled into his private chambers for the night. The castle around him continued its gentle rhythm of evening activities. The royal household, consisting of nearly 200 souls, each played their part in maintaining the complex organism that was medieval court life. In the kitchens below, Master Cook Bernard oversaw the cleaning of great copper pots and the banking of cooking fires that would smolder gently through the night, ready to spring back to life with tomorrow's dawn. The castle's evening routines had been refined over generations of royal service. Each person, from the highest noble to the youngest page, understood their role in the intricate dance that ensured the smooth functioning of royal administration. Lady Isabella, the Queen's chief lady-in-waiting, moved quietly through the royal apartments, ensuring that tomorrow's garments were properly arranged and that the chambers were prepared for peaceful rest. In the scriptorium, Brother Francis worked by candlelight, carefully copying important documents and preparing the scrolls that would carry royal messages to distant corners of the realm. His skilled hands moved steadily across the parchment, creating the beautiful lettering that would preserve King Edmund's decisions for future generations. The quiet scratching of his quill provided a soothing counterpoint to the gentle sounds of the settling castle. The castle guards maintained their vigilant watch from the high towers and along the thick walls that protected the royal residence. Captain Marcus walked the ramparts, checking on his men and ensuring that all remained peaceful in the land surrounding the castle. The soft glow of torches marked their positions, creating points of warm light against the star-filled darkness of the medieval night. The kingdom's nocturnal life beyond the castle walls, the kingdom of Thornwick settled into its own patterns of nighttime activity. In the villages scattered across the realm, families gathered around their hearth fires, sharing simple meals and stories that had been passed down through countless generations. The blacksmith Thomas banked his forge fire, knowing that tomorrow would bring new demands for horseshoes, tools, and the countless metal objects that sustained medieval life. Merchant caravans, traveling under the protection of royal safe conduct passes, continued their careful progress along the main roads. These brave traders carried goods from distant lands, bringing prosperity to the kingdom while risking the dangers of nighttime travel. Their guards remained alert for any signs of trouble, knowing that their vigilance protected not only valuable cargo, but the commercial relationships that sustained the realm's economy. The monasteries throughout the kingdom observed their ancient rhythms of prayer and contemplation. At St. Barthus in Zavi, Brother Michael led the midnight prayers, his voice joining with those of his fellow monks in the timeless chants that had echoed through these stone halls for centuries. Their prayers included special intentions for King Edmund and the welfare of all who lived under his protection. In the great manor houses of the nobility, lords and ladies dealt with their own responsibilities and concerns. Duke Robert, whose lands bordered the mysterious western forests, met quietly with his most trusted scouts to discuss the strange reports that had been filtering in from that remote region. Lady Margaret, whose estates produced much of the kingdom's finest wool, reviewed accounts with her steward, ensuring that the royal taxes would be paid promptly and that her tenants would have adequate provisions for the coming winter. The royal gardens and natural harmony. The Rosti, castle's extensive gardens, carefully tended by Master Gardener Hugh and his dedicated assistants, provided a haven of natural beauty within the fortress walls. Even in the gentle moonlight, the organized beds of herbs, vegetables, and flowers displayed the careful planning that went into sustaining royal life. The medicinal herb garden supplied the castle's physician with the plants needed to treat illnesses and injuries, while the vegetable plots ensured fresh produce for the royal table throughout the growing season. Ancient fruit trees, planted by previous generations of royal gardeners, stood like silent sentinels in the moonlight. Their branches, heavy with apples and pears, would soon provide the fresh fruit and preserved provisions that would sustain the castle through the winter months. The careful cultivation of these gardens represented the same long-term thinking that characterized all aspects of effective royal administration. The castle's fish ponds, fed by a carefully diverted stream, provided fresh fish for the royal table while creating peaceful reflections of the night sky. These man-made lakes required constant maintenance and careful management to ensure healthy fish populations, but they represented the kind of sustainable resource development that wise rulers pursued to reduce their dependence on external supplies. A small deer park, enclosed within the castle's outer walls, provided both fresh venison for special occasions and peaceful recreation for the royal family. The gentle animals grazed quietly in the moonlight, their presence adding a touch of natural beauty to the carefully planned environment that surrounded the seat of royal power. Seasonal preparations and royal foresight as autumn deepened into its later stages. The entire kingdom engaged in the crucial preparations that would determine how well the realm would weather the coming winter months. King Edmund's earlier decisions about grain storage, tax collection, and military positioning would soon be tested by the harsh realities of medieval winter conditions. The royal granaries, massive stone buildings designed to protect stored grain from moisture and vermin, held the accumulated harvests that represented survival for thousands of people. Master Grainkeeper Simon conducted regular inspections of these vital supplies, carefully monitoring the condition of wheat, barley, and oats that would feed the kingdom through the months when fresh food would be scarce. Throughout the realm, local officials implemented the preparation policies that had been developed in the royal councils. Village headmen organized work parties to repair roofs and walls that would need to withstand winter storms. Craftsmen worked longer hours to complete the tools, clothing, and household items that would be needed during the months when outdoor work would be limited by cold and snow. The kingdom's military preparations took on special urgency as winter approached. Enemy forces often chose the late autumn months for raids and attacks, hoping to capture supplies and provisions before retreating to their own territories for the winter. Sir Marcus, the royal marshal, coordinated defensive preparations throughout the realm, ensuring that border fortresses were adequately supplied and that warning systems were in place to alert the kingdom to any threats. Religious communities throughout the realm increased their charitable activities as winter approached, distributing food and clothing to the poor while all offering prayers for the kingdom's welfare. The church's role in medieval society extended far beyond spiritual matters to include practical care for those who might otherwise suffer. During the harsh winter months, the art of medieval diplomatic relationships that King Edmund carefully maintained, required constant attention and subtle management that extended far beyond formal negotiations and treaty agreements. The medieval world operated according to complex codes of honor, precedence, and mutual obligation that governed interactions between rulers, nobles, and other political entities. Royal correspondence, carefully crafted by skilled clerks under the king's direct supervision, served as one of the primary tools for maintaining these delicate relationships. Each letter required careful consideration of tone, content, and timing to ensure that the intended message was conveyed while avoiding any language that might be misinterpreted or cause offense. Gift-giving played a crucial role in medieval diplomatic practice, with the value, timing, and symbolism of presents carrying important political messages. King Edmund's treasury included a carefully curated collection of valuable objects, specifically intended for diplomatic purposes: fine weapons, beautiful textiles, precious jewelry, and rare books that could convey respect and friendship while demonstrating the kingdom's prosperity and cultural sophistication. Marriage alliances represented the most significant diplomatic tool available to medieval rulers, creating bonds between royal families that could influence political relationships for generations. The negotiations surrounding potential marriages required extraordinary delicacy, as these arrangements affected not only the immediate parties, but the broader balance of power throughout the region. Trade agreements served both economic and diplomatic functions, creating mutual dependencies that encouraged peaceful relationships, while generating the revenue that supported royal administration. King Edmund understood that successful merchants created prosperity that benefited all levels of society while building relationships that could provide valuable intelligence about conditions in foreign lands, the royal treasury, and economic wisdom. The management of royal finances required sophisticated understanding of economic principles that modern people might not expect from medieval rulers. King Edmund's treasury operated according to careful budgets and long-term planning that balanced immediate needs against future requirements and unexpected emergencies. Royal revenue came from numerous carefully managed sources, each requiring different approaches and considerations. Agricultural estates provided both food for the royal household and income from surplus production sold in local markets. Mining operations extracted precious metals and useful materials while providing employment for local populations. Customs duties and trading fees generated income while encouraging commercial activity that benefited the entire kingdom. Tax collection represented both a crucial source of revenue and a delicate political challenge that required careful balancing of royal needs against the ability of subjects to pay. Excessive taxation could trigger rebellions or economic hardship that would ultimately reduce royal income, while insufficient revenue could leave the kingdom unable to maintain adequate defenses or provide necessary services. The Royal Mint operated under strict supervision to prevent counterfeiting and debasement, produced the coins that facilitated trade throughout the realm. The purity and weight of royal currency served as symbols of the kingdom's stability and trustworthiness, encouraging merchants from distant lands to engage in beneficial commercial relationships. Financial planning required thinking years into the future about potential military campaigns, infrastructure projects, and economic developments that could affect royal resources. King Edmund maintained detailed records of income and expenditure that allowed him to identify trends and make informed decisions about resource allocation. The cultural life of the medieval court. The royal court served as a center of cultural development and artistic patronage that influenced the intellectual life of the entire kingdom. King Edmund understood that supporting learning, literature, and the arts enhanced the realm's reputation while preserving knowledge and cultural traditions for future generations. The castle's library, one of the largest collections of books in the kingdom, provided resources for the education of royal family members and court officials while serving as a repository for important documents and scholarly works. Brother Augustine, the royal librarian, carefully maintained these precious manuscripts while overseeing the copying of important texts that would preserve knowledge for future generations. Court musicians, supported by royal patronage, created and performed the songs and musical compositions that celebrated royal achievements, while providing entertainment for court gatherings. Master musician Ralph directed a small ensemble of skilled performers who could provide appropriate music for everything from intimate dinners to grand ceremonial occasions. The castle's workshops supported skilled craftsmen who created the beautiful objects that demonstrated royal taste and supported local artistic traditions. Master goldsmith Peter created jewelry and decorative objects that served both ceremonial purposes and diplomatic functions, while Master weaver Elizabeth produced the fine textiles that clothed the royal family and decorated the castle's chambers. Traveling scholars and poets found welcome at the royal court, bringing news from distant lands while sharing knowledge and cultural innovations that enriched the kingdom's intellectual life. These visitors often stayed for extended periods, contributing to discussions of philosophy, theology, and natural science that helped keep the royal court connected to the broader currents of medieval thought. The spiritual dimensions of royal service. The medieval understanding of kingship included profound spiritual dimensions that influenced every aspect of royal decision-making and personal conduct. King Edmund's daily prayers and religious observances were not merely ceremonial duties, but genuine expressions of his belief that earthly authority came from divine sources and must be exercised according to moral principles. The royal chapel, with its beautiful stained glass windows depicting biblical scenes and saints' lives, served as a constant reminder of the spiritual context within which temporal power operated. Father Benedict's guidance helped the king navigate the complex moral questions that arose from the practical demands of governance, ensuring that royal policies reflected Christian principles of justice and compassion. Religious festivals throughout the year provided opportunities for the royal family to demonstrate their piety while strengthening connections with their subjects. The elaborate celebrations of Christmas, Easter, and other holy days included charitable distributions to the poor, special masses for the welfare of the kingdom, and ceremonial events that reinforced the sacred nature of royal authority. Pilgrimage traditions connected the royal court to the broader Christian community while providing opportunities for spiritual reflection and renewal. Although the demands of governance prevented King Edmund from undertaking lengthy pilgrimages himself, he supported the journeys of court members and provided protection for pilgrims traveling through his territories. The Relationship between royal authority and church. Hierarchy required constant attention and careful balance. King Edmund needed to maintain good relationships with bishops and abbots whose spiritual authority commanded respect throughout the kingdom, while ensuring that church interests did not conflict with the broader needs of royal governance. The challenges of medieval communication. The difficulties of communication in medieval times created constant challenges for royal administration that required innovative solutions and careful planning. King Edmund's ability to govern effectively depended on his success in overcoming the limitations of distance and time that separated the royal court from the far corners of the realm. The royal messenger service, organized like a military unit with carefully planned routes and relay stations, provided the primary means of official communication throughout the kingdom. These brave riders faced dangers from weather, difficult terrain, and potential bandits while carrying the messages that kept the kingdom functioning as a coherent political entity. Signal systems using fires, flags, and horn calls provided faster communication over shorter distances, allowing rapid warning of emergencies or coordination of military movements. These systems required careful maintenance and training to ensure reliability, but they could convey basic information much more quickly than written messages. The development of standardized administrative procedures helped ensure that royal policies were implemented consistently throughout the realm, even when direct communication was delayed or interrupted. Local officials received detailed instructions about how to handle common situations, reducing the need for constant consultation with the royal court. Regular circuits by royal representatives provided opportunities for direct communication with distant regions while demonstrating royal attention to local conditions. These traveling officials could gather information, resolve disputes, and convey royal policies more effectively than written correspondence alone. The legacy of royal wisdom. As the night deepened and the castle settled into complete quiet, King Edmund reflected on the lasting impact that his daily decisions would have on future generations. The true measure of royal success lay not in immediate achievements, but in the long-term development of institutions, policies, and traditions that would continue to benefit the kingdom long after his reign had ended. The legal precedents established through royal judgments would influence how justice was administered for centuries to come. The economic policies developed during his reign would shape the kingdom's prosperity and stability through changing conditions and challenges. The diplomatic relationships he carefully maintained would affect the realm's security and international standing for generations. Educational and cultural initiatives supported by royal patronage would preserve knowledge and artistic traditions while inspiring future developments in scholarship and creative expression. The physical infrastructure created during his reign, roads, bridges, fortifications, and public buildings, would serve the practical needs of countless future subjects. The example of wise and just governance that King Edmund strove to provide would influence the expectations and standards that future rulers would be expected to meet. The traditions and institutions he developed would create frameworks for effective governance that could adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining core principles of justice and service to the common good. Perhaps most importantly, the pattern of dedicated royal service that Edmund demonstrated would inspire future generations of leaders to approach their responsibilities with the same combination of practical wisdom, moral commitment, and personal sacrifice that characterized the best traditions of medieval kingship. The eternal rhythms of royal service in the deepest hours of night, when even the most dedicated servants had retired to their rest, King Edmund found himself alone with the profound responsibilities that defined his existence. The weight of kingship never truly lifted, even in sleep, as the welfare of hundreds of thousands of people remained always in his care. The gentle sounds of the sleeping castle the soft footsteps of guards on their rounds, the distant call of night birds, the whisper of wind through the ancient stone corridors provided a soothing background for royal contemplation. These quiet hours offered the only time when Edmund could fully consider the deeper meaning and purpose of the life he had chosen to live in service to his people. The challenges facing medieval rulers required a rare combination of practical skills and spiritual wisdom that few human beings could develop and maintain over the decades required for effective kingship. The daily routine of royal service demanded physical stamina, intellectual capacity, emotional resilience, and moral strength that had to be constantly renewed through prayer, study, and disciplined self-improvement. The legacy of King Edmund the Wise would ultimately be measured not by the wealth he accumulated or the territories he conquered, but by the positive difference his reign made in the lives of ordinary people who looked to their king for protection, justice, and wise leadership. The true rewards of royal service came from the knowledge that dedicated leadership could create conditions that allowed entire communities to prosper and thrive. As dawn approached and the cycle of royal service prepared to begin anew, King Edmund rested with the quiet satisfaction that comes from a life dedicated to purposes greater than personal comfort or convenience. The eternal rhythms of leadership would continue, carrying forward the best traditions of medieval kingship while adapting to meet the ever-changing needs of a dynamic and evolving world. In the gentle darkness before dawn, the kingdom of Thornwick slept peacefully under the watchful care of a ruler who understood that true power lies in serving others with wisdom, courage, and unwavering dedication to the common good. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities for service, but tonight offered the rest and renewal that would prepare King Edmund to continue his lifelong commitment to the welfare of his people and the prosperity of his realm.